more than anything, we want to generate some kind of awareness of mistreatment of our seniors in our community, what it looks like. We want you to know what the resources are in our community to report suspected mistreatment. And we want you to know what kind of scams, fraud, and identity theft are out there happening every day, 24/7. And we want you to be able to, as a citizen in Blount County, be able to recognize abuse, neglect, and possible self-neglect. And also, we want to close with the supports and services to deal with caregiver stress. The facts: by 2030, seniors will make up 22% of the Tennessee population compared to 13% in 2010. Approximately 1 in 10 Americans aged 60 and older have experienced some elder abuse. From 2015 to 2019, reports of elder abuse in Tennessee increased by 25%. Okay, so I can tell you, I can attest that 20, 21, and 22, and 23, and 24, it has gone up exponentially. Elder abuse is dramatically unreported. Only 1 in 23 incidences of abuse is reported. Seniors are most likely to be mistreated, and it's not unusual for the abuser to be an adult child in their 60s who's caring for a patient in their 80s. 90% of abuse and neglect, passive and active, and we'll talk about that kind of neglect, is by relatives. Of those, 50% are the adult children. 52% of the abusers are usually men, and 30% of the abusers are over the age of 60. And I'll put a little quote down. Elder abuse is kind of like child abuse. It's domestic violence, but it's in the type of a family violence. Mistreatment most often occurs when a senior is isolated, socially isolated, and lonely. They have diminished cognitive ability. They depend on others for their care and needs. They have limited physical health. They can't really get around. They're not very mobile. They've developed some mental health issues as well. And there's psychological and behavior symptoms such as agitation and aggression, which brings on abuse. Why would an older adult not disclose mistreatment? Well, they may not even know that their treatment is abusive. There's a lot of fear and shame if they even are aware that they're being neglected, abused. And it depends on the person that's hurting them. They may depend on this person for everything. They are dependent on them to take care of them. Or they are cognitively impaired. They don't want the abuser to be punished or taken away or arrested or charged. It's usually a child. And a lot of our seniors distrust authorities in general. If you care for someone, you are their advocate. And that's why I wanted to present this program today, is because someone in their 60s, 70s, or even their 90s that means a lot to you. Now imagine that this person has been harmed by another, maybe verbal abuse. Imagine someone telling them that they're too slow or confused, or that no one cares about them, or that they're just taking up space. Someone calls and pretends to be from the IRS, Social Security Administration, Medicare, or Grandpa, I need money for bail. They say they have unpaid taxes, the person over the phone, and threatens to arrest or deportation. Or they say your benefits will be cut off if you don't provide personal identifying information. With that said, Thomas Hopkins is going to talk to you about protecting vulnerable adults here in the state of Tennessee in Blount County. He's from Adult Protective Services.
I'm certainly grateful to be here today, folks. As Ms. Teresa said, my name is Thomas Hopkins, and I work with Adult Protective Services here in Blount County. I'm the only investigator for Blount County, and I work in Blount County only. So we have a few things we're going to talk about today. We're going to go through our APS program, discuss our criteria a little bit on how we accept cases and things of that nature. We're going to explain the investigation process, and we're going to define caretaker and caregiver, as that's a critical part of what we do at APS. We're going to also define the types of abuse a little bit. We'll kind of move through that rather quickly, as some of our other panelists are going to touch on that a little bit more. Critical to APS is also our right to self-determination, or a person's right to self-determination. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, and then we're going to discuss some of the legal options that APS has in certain cases. So Adult Protective Services, we're a part of the Division of Child Care and Community Services, and we're within the Tennessee Department of Human Services. We're mandated by state law to intervene in circumstances of abuse, neglect, or exploitation of vulnerable adults. Really want to hit on this slide just real quick. Pay attention here at the tree part. That's our APS why and how. We believe that all adults should be safe, valued, heard, and treated with dignity. We believe that as an APS team across the state, and we work towards that every day. Reporting to APS. If you've made a report to APS before, some of this may look familiar. If you haven't, well, here you go. Reporting to APS, our APS centralized statewide intake system is available 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. You can report one of three ways: by phone, online, or by the mail. Probably the most common are by phone and online. If you call that APS hotline there, that gets you directly to one of our intake counselors who can talk with you through the process and help you or fill out that report for you. If you want to go at it alone, sometimes you can do it online. If you're like me, you like to see what the report is and you like to type it out so you know exactly what you're going to say. So who should report to APS? Very easy. Everybody. Any person who has reasonable cause to suspect that an adult has suffered abuse, neglect, or exploitation shall report to authorities. Notice it says any person who has reasonable cause. Tennessee is a mandatory reporter state. That means anybody, not just nurses or doctors or police officers or firefighters. Anybody is required to make a report if they suspect that abuse is happening. When you make a report, you can remain anonymous through that report if you would like, but it's important to know that if the report is made anonymously, we will not notify you at the conclusion of the investigation. And some people go in with the idea of, I'm going to, as an APS investigator, I will keep them up to date of the investigation and tell you everything that I found in it. That is not the case. I will call you at the beginning of the investigation to gather more information, and then I will call you to let you know that the investigation is closed. APS criteria, we're going to sit here for just a second on this. All of these things have to happen in some sort of way for an APS case to be accepted for investigation. So very first off, the person has to be over the age of 18. Anybody under that age, that's DCS, not us. And then impaired functional status that prevents self-protection. Those can come in one of three ways. Most often we see is diminished cognitive functioning. So usually folks that are having some sort of difficulties with dementia or just the aging process. Physical health, we see that often too. A lot of older folks just slowing down. And frailty due to advanced age. There has to be no others that are willing and able to assist in the situation. A lot of times we work with other people that are involved to help out the person, but really we want to be able to empower the family or the friends or the community to be able to work with that person as well. There has to be an allegation of abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation. There has to be some sort of allegation for us to be able to act on or be able to investigate. The alleged perpetrator in the case, this is key right here, alleged perpetrator has to be a caregiver. The person committing the crime or allegedly committing the crime has to be a caregiver, except for sex abuse cases. That's the only time when we will accept a case regardless of whether the person is a caregiver or not, is in the case of sex abuse. And so all of those kind of have to hit for us to be able to accept a case. it's important to know that just because someone hits one of the functional status issues, whether that be diminished cognitive functioning, physical health, or frailty due to aging, if they hit one of those things, it has to be preventing them from caring for themselves in some way. Just because somebody is unable to do everything they physically once were able to, doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be an APS case. So who we serve, just some pictures there. We serve a lot of different people. I've had people as young as 18 all the way up to in the 80s and 90s and everywhere in between. So we really do serve a wide range of folks here at APS. Confidentiality is pretty big and is pretty key. If you ask anybody that works with me or talks with me frequently, they'll know I'm pretty huge on this. The identity of the reporter is confidential. We do not give that information to anybody that asks. It has to be court-ordered for us to release that information. And if I had to guess, I've never had that happen before, but if I had to guess, it wouldn't be me releasing that information. So confidentiality is really key for us. Anything that happens during the investigation, anything that comes to my knowledge as an investigator throughout the course of my investigation is kept with me unless I feel like it's going to help my client to share that information. A lot of times we divulge information in order for the person to be able to access services, to be able to complete our investigation, or to gather other information that we may need. So confidentiality is really, really big for us. So what we do, we accept reports of abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation through our intake unit. Every case has to start there. When we get a case, it has to go through intake first, and a report has to be made before it will make its way down to me, and I can help out in a situation. We investigate and intervene when appropriate and necessary. We have lots of different screening criteria that we have to look at, and so it helps us know when is best for us to step into a situation and when is not best. We arrange for the provision of services. These are just a few of the folks we work with. The CREVA program from the East Tennessee Area Agency on Aging and Disability. CREVA stands for the Collaborative Response to Elder and Vulnerable Adult Abuse. We work with the DHS Homemaker quite a bit, and the Choices program, options, Meals on Wheels, and things like that. All the folks you see here on the panel today, we work with them very frequently. And so we can also seek intervention from the court in certain circumstances. We engage in community partnerships. I'm going to touch on this here in just a second, but we have partners all over the place, whether they're our area agency on aging and disability or law enforcement, any one of the other state departments that can help us out. APS notifies all applicable partners, even if the report is not assigned for investigation. So a lot of times when I tell folks that at this time your report will not be accepted for investigation, they get really worried and think, nobody's going to check on this report that I made, and nobody's going to look into this situation. Maybe not necessarily. Often when we get a report of abuse, neglect, or exploitation, regardless of whether that's accepted for APS investigation or not, we will notify the district attorney and as well as the law enforcement agency that holds jurisdiction in that area. So our 3 law enforcement agents, or 4 actually, Blount County Sheriff's Office, Maryville Police Department, Alcoa Police Department, and Townsend Police Department, we have folks at all those agencies that often will look at these reports and determine if they think it should be followed up on for their investigative purposes. And then we also talk with the district attorney's office. There's an attorney there that handles a lot of these cases, and we meet together often to talk about these cases and see what needs to be done for someone. Also, if you call APS intake, our counselors are trained to provide information about available resources. So a lot of times we get reports where you just need connection to something. You just need to be connected to the Office on Aging or over to Home Health Services. You just need that connection, and then we don't have to get involved to make all that happen. We can just give that to you, and somebody can take that and run with it. Our response times, very easy. Every case that we accept for investigation or every case that comes in is assigned a response time, priority A, B, or C. Priority A means that we have to get out there to visit the person in person within 24 hours. Priority B means that we have 1 to 5 business days to act on that, and priority C means we have 1 to 7 business days to act on that. And this is the definition for a caregiver and caretaker. We're going to sit on this for just a second as well. A caregiver or caretaker, remember, there has to be a report that involves the alleged perpetrator being a caregiver or a caretaker in order for APS to accept the case. So, in short, the person or institution that has assumed the duty to provide for care of the adult by contract or agreement or service exchange. Our caregivers may be paid or unpaid. A lot of times we have family members that are acting as caregivers for their loved one. That's a caregiver for us. And then we also have certain situations where a facility might be the alleged perpetrator, or a nurse or a staff member at the facility. For a family member to be classified as a caregiver, they must meet all of these criteria. They must reside in the same building with or regularly visit the adult, and they know or reasonably should know of an adult's cognitive or physical dysfunction or advanced age, and they know or reasonably should know that an adult is unable to adequately provide for their care. So that's just kind of a real quick overview of what a caregiver is. And remember, we have to have these in our cases, except in instances where there's sexual abuse. In those cases, we can investigate pretty much anybody. All right. There's a brief description of neglect. This occurs when the basic needs of the vulnerable adult are not met by the caregiver. We'll move on. Abuse, physical and emotional abuse. I think one of our other panelists is going to hit on this a little bit, so I won't read the physical and emotional abuse definitions to you, but I will read the sexual abuse one because we deal with those cases semi-often. So sex abuse occurs when a vulnerable adult is forced or tricked into engaging in sexual activity or is exposed to sexual activity by anyone. Remember that the person that is perpetrating the sexual abuse does not have to be a caregiver in this case. Financial exploitation, I think we're going to have some folks hit on that as well, but I will read the definition real fast on this just because there's financial exploitation and financial abuse that we designate in APS. Financial exploitation occurs when a caregiver improperly uses funds intended for care or use of a vulnerable adult. These are funds paid to the vulnerable adult or caregiver by a governmental agency, Social Security, the SNAP program, veterans pensions, things like that. Financial abuse occurs when the caregiver or caretaker creates a situation in which the adult is unable to provide or obtain the services that are necessary to maintain the adult's personal health or welfare. It's defined as behavior that is coercive, deceptive, or that unreasonably controls or restrains the person's ability to acquire, use, or maintain economic resources to which the person is entitled, including using coercion, fraud, or manipulation. That's a mouthful, but that's a good difference between the two. Self-neglect is pretty big. On May 1st of last year, about the time I started taking cases with APS, we had a change in the APS law that impacted our authority to be able to investigate self-neglect cases. Across the state, there was a lot of issues with that. We had a lot of people that were going without help and without services. So on February 28th of 2024, this year, our state legislator amended the law to restore authority for us to investigate self-neglect cases. We are going a lot with those. There's a lot of self-neglect cases out there. Self-neglect is defined as an adult's inability due to physical or cognitive impairment, including diminished capacity to provide or obtain services, including medical services, necessary to maintain the adult's own health or welfare. Essentially, that's a big, long definition to say that when somebody's having issues taking care of themselves and it's due to physical or cognitive impairment, that's a self-neglect situation. Right to self-determination, this is huge for APS, as I said. Adults, regardless of age or condition, have a right and responsibility to direct their own lives to the greatest extent possible. Every client will be given every opportunity to make plans for themselves to the degree possible and be given as much information about the alternatives and options that are available to assist in making an informed decision. Thankfully, we live in America, and so everybody has the right to make their own decisions until somebody says they're not able to. Most often that has to come from a medical professional or a court. Has to deem a person incompetent to make their own decisions. Legal involvement. There's a lot of different things that have to happen for APS to get involved on a legal front, and so a person must lack capacity to consent to protective services. That person must be declared to be mentally incompetent, and they must be declared to lack capacity to make their own decisions by a medical professional or a court. The person must be in imminent danger of harm. We'll define that in a second. All other possible alternatives to legal action must have been explored or exhausted. There's also two more things that aren't up there. For us to be able to get involved and to take custody of somebody, we have to have a placement for them to go to. So we have to usually have a nursing home or an assisted living facility that will take them and has committed to take them. And we have to have a funding source for somebody to be able to pay for that. If they can't pay for it themselves, we have to have somebody else agree that they're going to pay for it. So we have to hit a lot of different criteria for us to be able to go to our legal department and ask if we can take custody of somebody. Legal definitions, imminent danger, we touched on that in the last slide. It's a long definition there, but basically means when conditions are calculated to and are capable of producing a relatively short period of time a reasonably strong possibility of irreparable harm or cessation of life, or both. The capacity to consent is the mental ability to make rational decisions, and so capacity to consent is big for APS. I'm almost always going to ask that whenever I'm getting a new case, if they have capacity or not. This is on our state website as well. This is kind of the flow of a report and how all of it goes, and so you can kind of read and see what happens and how we work our cases. And so I think that's all I've got for now.
Hey guys, I'm Ashley Speed. This is John Bateman. We are from Blount County Sheriff's Office Senior Outreach. We're going to talk to you about scams and how to protect yourself with it.
Scammers will try to trick you in many ways. We have a lot of numbers up there, a lot of figures up there. I'm more into telling you history or things that we've been involved with to let you understand how things happen. People are very deceptive. You would not believe we run into this weekly. Kids and grandkids, all they want is the money, or they want them out of the house so they can have the property they want out of the house. We see this almost on a weekly basis. It's unreal. I can't fathom it. What did your parents do to you to make you treat them like that? You neglect them. You know, it's unreal. But they'll do all kinds of things. Here's the statistics real quick that totally amazes me how much is scammed. Over 60, just in Tennessee, $43 million in scams in 2023. That is a lot coming out of people's pockets who can't afford it. They can't afford to be scammed. No matter if it's home repair, you've won the lottery, we're going to come get you and serve you a warrant. I will tell you, if we got a warrant for you, we're not going to call you and say we're coming. We're going to come knocking on your door.
Yeah. We don't call and ask for money. We don't show up. We don't call and say, hey, your grandkid's been in a wreck. You need to bail him out. Your grandkid was on vacation in Mexico. Don't tell his mom and dad he wasn't supposed to be there. He wants you to help him.
A lot of times they'll scam people. They'll look on Facebook for elderly people, and then they'll look down to see who their friends are. Oh, there's their granddaughter, or there's their grandson. They'll learn the name, and then they'll call and say, hey, this is Bobby. I got picked up for whatever. I don't want mom and dad to know. Send the money.
Charity fraud. There was actually just in Seymour over the weekend, a random gentleman sitting there on the side of the road said, donate to our boot fund. He was dressed as a firefighter. He had bunker gear on and a helmet on, and when they would stop and ask him, he would talk in circles and couldn't tell you what fire department, where it was going. He was portraying that it was for Seymour Volunteer Fire Department, which it was not. But he was getting people to donate to him. mean, he had a QR code set up so you could scan it as you're driving by or throw cash out to him. It was crazy. I mean, you don't think it happens, but it happens in person. They are not scared. You'll see the guy around Target or Kroger. I've not seen him this year, but last year he was out playing the violin and with the speaker. Scam. It's pure scam. It's all it is. They're out there, they walk away, and they get in a nicer vehicle than any of us can ever dream of. And they're affording it because out there with their sign saying, donate to us, we don't have any money for my kids, but yet they do.
You'll see a list here of a bunch of scams there. Romance scams is starting to be more popular.
Oh,
We had a
yes,
case
very
last-
much so.
We had a case last week where we went to go visit a lady. She lives alone, she's lonely. And before I was leaving, she told us that she was getting ready to go out on a date with somebody. I said, have you met this person? No, I just met him online. He was gonna take her and her dogs out for somewhere. I said, where are you going? She goes, I don't know. So you need to meet these people. If you're that lonely, don't do it online. Go to community centers, go to dances that they have, go to church functions, meet people that way and talk to them. Don't do online. You don't know who this person is that you're gonna meet, and you're gonna get in a car with this person and go somewhere? Don't. Do not do that. If you know family members who are lonely like that, tell them to try to go out. Go to church functions, go to community centers. Do things, become active in the community. A lot of times people maybe don't have the transportation, but a lot of these churches and stuff will have a bus or somebody come and pick them up and take them to these functions. So be careful of that, but that's getting more and more popular.
You're still insistent on going to meet them. Take your own vehicle, meet them somewhere in public for the
Yeah.
first time.
Business impersonators, yeah. They'll call you up and say, hey, we got a great deal here for you. We're going to invest, we got guarantee we're going to return your money plus 10%, 20%. And people fall for it.
Or they'll call and say your computer's been hacked. We need you to pay us with the green dot card to fix it. You can't do anything with your computer, or we'll turn your computer over for child porn to the sheriff's department. Anything to scare you. And people go and buy the gift cards and then turn them back in. Call them and give them all their money and they lose it.
Right.
We talked about the charity fraud.
Yeah, same thing.
Don't trust the caller IDs. They're able to change that instantly to say whoever is calling when it's not true. If you have questions about it, hang up and call the number that you actually have for them, not the number they've called you from.
Yeah. Now, it happens with the sheriff's department. Our lieutenant, people are getting a call from, it says Lieutenant Brad Butler, Blount County Sheriff's Office, saying wanting money or donation for the sheriff's department. We will not call you for money, we will not. But they have masked their caller ID to read his name or Blount County Sheriff's Office on it. So you assume it's gotta be true, It's not. Government impersonator scams. Real quick here. This is a story of a person where we had this case. We got notified from a bank, somebody lost their money. They were wiped out. What had happened, he'd been talking to this girl online. She was an actress, she said, and she hadn't worked for a while. And her name was Marie Jose Fernandez. So she was really hurt for money, and she played him up and stuff, got a relationship going. Then she asked him for money, so he gave her some money. Then she asked again, later on she asked him again, and this plays out over several weeks. And he finally says, how do I know it's you, or have I ever seen you in any shows? So she sent him a picture of her driver's license. It's not a good picture because that's what we got. But there's a picture of her name's right there, it says Marie Jose Fernandez. Anyway, so what's her stage name? Cote de Pablo. If you guys watch NCIS, it's her. That is her picture. This is a false ID, fake driver's license. It's got her picture on it. The first giveaway is How many of you go get your driver's license like in an evening gown, something like that, you know? Okay, so she pretty much got that. But that's not the worst. No short time later, he gets a call from the FBI saying, we understand you were scammed. You were along with everybody else got scammed from this person, and we're going after her. First, we need to verify who you are. What's your name and where do you live? What's your social security number? He gives it to them. So we want to be able to put the money back into your account. What's your bank account number? His social security check hit, gone. So he had to change bank accounts and everything. Took him, I think Social Security usually takes a couple months to switch all that. So they took all of his money. So be careful of who you deal with and who you talk to. It's a sad, sad case.
We briefly talked about the grandkids and the family scams. They will call you middle of the night especially. Tell you the grandkid's been in a wreck, you know, you gotta pay it now, gotta pay it now. It's a scam. You know, if you're questioning if your grandkids are on vacation somewhere, hang up and call their parents. Call your kids, find out, make sure.
Hey, I broke down on the side of the road on tow trucks here and I don't have the money to pay him. I got paid now in order to, for him to tow my car.
They'll even hand the phone to somebody else and pretend to be the tow truck driver. They don't care how vicious they have to be to get you to pay. They think of the ways. Healthcare. You will get a phone call saying your Social Security number has been paused because you have not done this or done that. We need you to verify it all, your date of birth, so we can get it active again for you. Or be a healthcare company calling to say, hey, we've got a better rate for you, but we need all this information from you.
In the fall time, when you have open enrollment, that's really when it's popular. Everybody comes out of the woodwork and get a new scam on Medicare and Medicaid and stuff. Be careful of that. Be very careful.
If the government is really calling you, they'll send you a letter. The IRS never calls you and asks you for information. They send you letters. The question is just really the government. Always the answer is no. It is not. Home repair scams, especially after storms like we just had. They'll come through. You'll have fly-by-night people. They want to stop. They'll just go door to door. Hey, we can fix that roof where the tree branch fell, or we can do this. We can fix your driveway. That's especially a good one. We've got extra pavement left over from this job we were doing down the road. We can do it. They come in, they'll either take your money, because you've got to pay them up front, and you'll never see them again. They come in and do shoddy work, which makes the damage even worse.
I've seen them, especially after a big hailstorm. They may have one or two tarps and they'll go up and go, oh yeah, you got some damage up here. We'll go put this tarp on it. But the roof is going to be $12,000, $15,000. We need like a $5,000 down payment. Write them a check or give them a credit card number.
We had one client a few years ago, and this was pre-COVID, so before prices went crazy. This was the grandson that actually did it, was living there and said, hey, Grandma, this tree fell on your roof, which it did. There was no damage to it, thankfully. However, she trusted the grandson, and his girlfriend's daddy came in and fixed the roof for $50,000. It was, wait y'all, it was a 1,100 square foot home. Single story, 1,100 square foot home, $50,000. And she paid it. She paid it. Identity theft.
We've already kind of talked a little bit about that. They're going to ask you for social security numbers, all that stuff. No one's going to ask you that. Occasionally you'll be dealing with an institution, they'll say, can you verify the last 4 of your social security? That's okay. Last 4, that's it. No, not the rest of them. A lot of places will want that, especially verification. If your phone service or cable service, they'll want to identify, make sure they're talking to you. They just need the last 4.
Investment scams. They'll call you. If it always sounds too good to be true, it is, y'all. It is. You're not going to get rich quick overnight. It doesn't happen that way. They'll come and tell you that it's a proven system, that it's guaranteed, and you'll give them your money and you get no returns whatsoever. no one can guarantee you a specific return
They
or
can't.
investment. It's just
No
not
way.
possible.
Most people, seniors we find, they're not looking for extra. They may be looking for extra work, but the work from home scams, we find that more for some of the younger people wanting to work from home and stuff. Maybe in their 40s, 50s, some in their 60s and stuff. They want to make extra money and stuff.
Biggest thing for stuff like that is they'll say, oh, hey, let me send you a check for $5,000. You keep 3,000 of it, send me 2 back. Well, you go cash it, deposit it, you send them the $2,000 back, and the bank calls 3 days later, hey, this check's no good. You owe us $5,000. And it's gone. Your money's gone. Tech support scams, like I talked about, pop up on your computer telling you you've got to pay pretty much your ransom to get your computer back, which is not true. It still works just fine.
Except with the healthcare system here a few months ago. I think it was United Health. They were hacked. They got held up by hackers in Russia. And I think they paid something like $20-some million.
St. Thomas Hospital was also hacked recently in Nashville.
Yeah. Yeah, hold it. We'll release this, but you have to pay us. So, yeah, it's terrible. Again, unwanted calls and text messages. If you don't recognize the number, don't answer it. If they want to leave you a message, they'll leave you a message. Same way with text. Hey, this is Barbara. I haven't spoken to you for a while. I'm going to come visit you, but I need money to get there. Something like that. Don't fall for it.
Talked about you've won the $2 million, but send us $5,000 to process it first.
Yeah.
Scam y'all.
If that's the case, if you guys send the money, why don't you just take it out of my winnings?
You can report scams to reportfraud.ftc.gov or call the 1-800 number there. It does make a difference, believe it or not.
Here's where you can contact Blount County Crime Prevention Hotline. There's the phone number. Again, do not answer unknown numbers. Do not open unknown links. A lot of times you go open a link somebody you don't know about. It's a Trojan that goes in and it starts grabbing all your information, and it can damage your computer. And then you have to pay somebody to fix it. A lot of the malware will not cover some of that stuff. No matter how good it is, it just doesn't do it. Do not call, go on the line. All those, the scammers ignore that.
They do.
They bypass it. I get calls all the time too at the house, so. Unknown numbers can be checked. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. You can go ahead and go to www.reversephone.com and it'll give you whose number that's coming from. A lot of times it'll say unknown. Then you know that's something, it's probably a fraudulent call then. And everybody should check their credit report. It's an annual credit report. A lot of these companies now, Experian, the rest of them. But anyway, they do it. They allow you to check it for free without no hit on your credit. Do that. Just make sure your credit's still good. All of a sudden, there's a credit card showing up on your account. I don't have that credit card. Then report it. So be very careful with all that.
Here are all the numbers that you can report fraud and identity theft and scams to. You've got the Tennessee Office of Inspector General, the Attorney General, and our mortgage fraud. All the information is listed down through there for the internet and the AARP fraud watch list, Social Security, identity theft.
So, like I said, just be aware, and if you have elderly people, parents and things like that, make sure they understand this. Be very leery anymore. It's a shame in this society now we have to be that way. It is. And we see this, like I said, weekly. We go out and do visitations. There's almost 30 of us in our program that do visitations Monday through Saturday. And we visit these people. The gentleman, the Cote de Pablo scam, the FBI, every time I go there, I ask him, did you send any money to anybody? It's no. He also has somebody else take care of his finances now. He has a power of attorney who has control. He goes, she's so tight with that money, I have to ask her to get money to go get a cheeseburger at McDonald's because she got scammed. So don't want to see that happen again. So, but be very careful.
Hi, I'm Mary Walker. I'm a nurse practitioner with Senior Care Partners. I've worked with seniors for over 20 years as a nurse practitioner. And so over the years, I've seen varying degrees of elder abuse and neglect. And so this is a very important subject, I think, for us to be aware of. So it's a community issue. It affects all of us, and we're all going to get older. And therefore, we're all subject to become victims of elder abuse. And it can be in the most wealthy families, or it can be in the most poor families. There's no real things that would define that you're not going to become a victim. So, and I think Teresa already mentioned about the statistics of how many people are being abused, and I read one statistic that said that over 5 million victims in the U.S. have been identified with abuse, and that's really probably a big underestimation because there is so much not reported. Types of mistreatment include physical, which is pretty straightforward. That's like someone's hitting someone and inflicting physical damage to that person. Emotional can be a little bit more tricky because it can include just saying mean things, but anything that's making that other person feel insecure, fearful, afraid, threatening things to them that, like, we're not going to take care of you or feed you or something. Anything that can make them fearful can be considered emotional or verbal abuse. We've already just talked about some ways with scams that people are being financially abused. And that also, I think, like we've already discussed, can come also often from family members. And one thing that I think we see is that indirectly people are being neglected or abused because over finances, because a family member is dependent on that person, the elder person, to provide a place for them to live and to provide part of their check to buy the groceries, and then suddenly that person is sick or something. They don't even want them to go to a different level of care. They want them to stay in the house. They don't necessarily want to take care of them, but they want that paycheck coming in every month. And sometimes they're also afraid that mama's going to use all the inheritance up if she goes in a assisted living or a nursing home, so it's not going to be left for me, so I'm not going to let her go even if she has the resources to take care of her. So that's also, I think, a form of financial abuse that is a little bit harder to see sometimes. I think you already talked a bit about sexual abuse. The main thing with that is if the older adult is unable to give effective consent, verbal or nonverbal, due to incapacity. That's sometimes a really dilemma. I work a lot in assisted livings, and sometimes love is in the air. And people actually do want to have sexual encounters, and there's a fine line between when it is or isn't okay, and sometimes the families are mortified, but we also have to recognize that older people are still sexual people, and sometimes we do have to allow those things, even if we're like, I don't know about this, but it is a little bit of a hard subject sometimes in that situation. And sometimes one family member thinks it's okay, and the other family is like, no, my mom would be rolling over in the grave right now. And so it becomes quite an interesting dilemma sometimes. But people are still have a right to be sexual people as they're aging. So we have to be careful there, but at the same time, we have to be willing to recognize when it's inappropriate sexual abuse. And even sometimes in married couples, if the person is severely demented, it isn't quite right for that other partner to be engaging in sexual activity. So then we have to help protect that person. Neglect and isolation is sometimes things like staying away from the home when the person needs to be supervised. Also, when you just don't let anybody else see them and you are basically isolating them from other people for whatever reason, whether it's financial gain or you're afraid they'll see that you're not doing a good job taking care of them, failing to feed them adequately, things like that. Self-neglect is a whole nother issue, and it involves sometimes very tricky, because we see a good bit of self-neglect and probably more and more of it. If people are looking like they're doing self-neglect, but they still have the capacity to determine, I want to live this way. I had a guy that was living in a van, and he had some disability, and I was wanting him to have some help, and he said, I want to live in my van. So that is then a different issue, because that person still has the right for self-determination. Indicators for physical abuse. Sometimes we see bruising, burns, fractures, lacerations. Sometimes we do see bruising and things that we might interpret as abuse, but we do have to be careful. We have to think about things. Are someone on blood thinner? Do they have thin skin? Things like that. So we have to be careful as medical providers that we're not accusing someone of abuse when it's not the case. At the same time, any healthcare provider is required, absolutely mandated, to report any suspicion of abuse or neglect. So there is a lot of responsibility involved with that. But if we do see unexplained injuries, bruising, weight loss that's unexplained, people that look neglected, they're not being given their medications, they're dehydrated, malnourished. Sometimes they'll end up in the emergency room, and the emergency doctors have to determine if they think that that is a case of abuse or neglect. Also, sometimes if there's multiple broken bones over time, it just keeps happening, then you start wondering, is there something going on here? I already talked a little bit about active neglect, where you're intentionally withholding care. Passive neglect is you're not providing the basic necessities and care because of a lack of experience, information, or ability. So sometimes it's unintentional. People don't realize, if they take on the responsibility of an elder person, that they have certain responsibilities that go with that. So sometimes they need education, and the problem can be solved, or they need resources that they didn't know were available. So just education is very important to help prevent passive neglect. Self-neglect, again, I discussed that a little bit. Risk factors for self-neglect include advanced age, male sex, in other words, us women take care of the men a lot, and so when they have to take care of themselves, sometimes they don't do such a good job of it. Disability, cognitive impairment, depression, a history of a fracture like a hip fracture or a stroke increases your risk for self-neglect, because you just can't get to the kitchen to make your meals or something. Social isolation, low socioeconomic status, intra-family conflicts can increase the risk for self-neglect. You don't get along with your kids, so they're not going to come around to check on you. And also, sometimes the caretaker has their own problems, like substance abuse or mental illness, so they're not able to come around and check on their parents. And I mentioned already that caretakers who are depending financially on the person who is in need there. So indicators of self-neglect, we see people that aren't bathing, they're not grooming themselves, they're not taking medicine, sometimes they're hoarders. We actually have nurse practitioners that go into homes and actually provide medical care, not as the home health agency, but as actually the medical providers. And a lot of times we see these kinds of situations. I always say, you don't know what people are going into when they leave the hospital door or the nursing home door. And it's a very eye-opener to go into the homes of some of these people. And you realize that probably neglect has been going on for a long time. The other thing you have to do is be respectful of their home and realize that maybe they have lived like this long before they became an elder. And it may not be our place unless it is a hazard to their health or a risk for possible death or something like that that can happen. But we do see some bad situations. And then a lot of times they haven't been to the doctor in years. They're not able to physically get out of the home, things like that. And I understand that because it's going to cost them several $100s to go to the doctor by ambulance because you can't go any other way. So people just don't go. And it's a very huge problem, and that's why Senior Care Partners have partnered with the Blount County Sheriff's Department and some other places because we know this is a huge problem all over the country, actually, where people can't get out to go for medical care, so they just don't get medical care. So then if we could send medical care to them, then we know that we can make a difference. So it's a very big problem. Now, the other issue with self-neglect, even if we can determine it, and it's very common with dementia patients, because sometimes they're fearful to take a bath, so they don't take one. So we would call that self-neglect. We have people that will go weeks without a bath, or maybe probably months without a bath unless somebody intervenes. And even if you move them into an assisted living or a nursing home, they still don't want to take a bath. They'll beat you up. They will fight you tooth and nail. They're not going to take a bath. I think it comes with dementia and fear of falling and just fear of getting wet, fear of getting cold. So sometimes we have to identify those things and we have to coax them, we have to help them. But people don't have to take a bath every day. Usually if you're in a facility, you get a bath a couple of times a week and you get spot cleaning in between. So, that's something I think we have to recognize, that our idea that you need to have a shower every day or twice a day, sometimes we can't impose our values on that, but if we can get somebody to take a bath once or twice a week, we're at least getting them clean once or twice a week. So there are sometimes compromises that have to be made, and you have to be able to be sure that we are making friends with them and getting them on our side so that they will listen to us and let us help them, so that you can provide services or get them to accept services. Again, they have the right to refuse care if they have ability to do that. There is a little bit said here about what they're calling show timing, where people with mild to moderate dementia don't recognize that they have any disease process, which is very hard to deal with. And so they put on their best show for their family, that you take them to the doctor and they say, I'm fine, everything's good, and the doctor has allotted 6 minutes to spend with them, and so the doctor thinks everything is fine because they're looking good at the moment. Well, sometimes you need to be the family member who goes to the doctor's appointment with them and says everything is not fine and we need help. That happened in our own family, and we were able to get help, but somebody had to go in and say it's really not fine. And the doctor's face was like, oh. And I have families all the time that say, I would go over every week and mow the grass and Mom seemed fine, and now she can't even figure out how to put her clothes on or feed herself or whatever. And it's like she probably, or she's staying up all night or whatever, and they thought she was sleeping and that she was fine and she was doing good staying by herself, but she's not. But they don't recognize it until some medical emergency happens. You know, mom's broken her arm and she can't even do anything for herself. So sometimes you have to intervene and get them more help than you anticipated. And a lot of families just haven't seen it coming. But the main thing is that we're not missing real neglect, real abuse. And so I think you have to always also, as a provider, a medical provider, keep in mind that what's coming from the mouth of the person that's the caregiver, sometimes you have to really take that with a grain of salt, and you have to really look at that there may be something underlying. What we do is evaluate capacity. The legal system, the judge determines competency, but we can help initially if you can get them in for a geriatric evaluation. They will do the capacity evaluation and help families get started with what needs to happen to get help in the home or help in a facility or whatever needs to happen. So if you're seeing people that need help, we can be helpers to you. We are a resource that can help you get the information that's needed to start the process of getting more resources in the home. And it is a multidisciplinary approach. It takes everyone working together, our legal people, our law enforcement people, our home health, hospice, our APS. It's a multidisciplinary approach to really take care of our elders.
We talked a lot today about how to recognize exploitation and abuse and the situation that caregivers are often in where they're under a great deal of strain. And we want to talk certainly about things that caregivers can do to prevent that stress and strain and that situation of that builds up. And as we had talked before, that situation of exploitation among the family members.
Hey everybody. So I'm a hospice social worker, and I go into probably at least 20 homes a week working with, of course, the patient and their families. Obviously the family is incredibly important when doing this work, and it's important that I give them resources and kind of help them on this journey that they're on. We're going to go kind of quickly because this is running over, but the first thing is taking care of yourself. Of course, that looks different for everybody, right? What does that look like? I remember in school when we used to talk about this as social worker, because social work burnout is a real thing too, and everybody would always be like, what is that? Sure, a hot bath is good. Yes, that's a good thing, but it's much deeper than that, right? We need to be focusing on our emotional health, our spiritual health, our physical health. Of course, that looks different for everybody. Asking for help is important, and we're going to actually go over a lot of resources here in a minute with regards to who you can seek out help for, okay? Learning to respond appropriately to difficult behaviors with your person is important. Identifying your own stress triggers is important. That's different for every person. We've talked a lot about elder abuse, and speaking up is important. Moving forward. Some ways you can take care of yourself is taking breaks when you can. There's an awesome new respite adult daycare in our community that we're going to talk about. You know, I'm just going to let you read through that because we're going to be talking more about that in a minute. Ways to ask for help: seek help from family members and create a care team. A care team is so important. You can do it alone. I don't recommend it, but people do. I see it all the time, but it is more stressful if you don't have good support. So creating a care team of people that can have your back when you need it. Make use of support services like we've talked about with the respite care. You know, we've got Smoky Mountain Meals on Wheels in this area. The Office on Aging is full of wonderful resources to help our caregivers in the community. We're going to talk more about that as well. And there are also a lot of really wonderful caregiving agencies in our community that you can hire, and they can come into your home and assist you. We've got people representing those agencies as well. And all that's, I have to just bring this up because I just feel like I need to, because I have this conversation all the time, and all that is private pay with the caregiving agencies. So if that is out of your affordability range, there are programs that help people to be able to afford that. And I would just encourage you to speak with your local Office on Aging about that, or even me. I mean, I'm happy to talk to anybody in our community regarding resources. I work for Blount Hospice, but I'm happy to speak with anybody at any time.
The next section is really more about how to communicate with your loved one and how to recognize that you've got issues. But I want to go ahead and I'm going to scooch right on down to caregiver support groups. There are multitudes of caregiver support groups in Maryville. There's literally one every week, and we have a new one in Townsend as well. I want to encourage you, if you are a caregiver, at the earliest possible time, to go ahead and seek out your tribe. These are the people that have been through this before you. These are the people that might know how it goes when you put an application in with the Office on Aging. One of the first things that I do when I talk with people with the caregiver support hotline is ask, have you called the Office on Aging? Have you put in an application? They have greater than 30 programs. I don't know for sure if you're going to qualify for them or even need them, but I do urge you all to go ahead and put your application in. So find yourself a group, go to the Office on Aging. I'm going to stop on this slide right here. Adult day centers. We try to avoid the term daycare because that has a juvenile connotation, but if you need help during the day, even for short periods, there are some folks that provide these services. And these are definitely cash on the barrelhead, but some of them also do have cooperation with other ways of having those paid for. So if you have limited resources, altogether now, start with the Office on Aging. If you haven't put in your application with the Office on Aging, you don't know if it's going to be covered for you. So some of these services might be covered. Senior support services continuing, and these are some more ways of reaching out. Now, I will tell you, like Mary had mentioned, there's a lot of different ways to get care if your person that you're taking care of has memory loss. Even at the earliest stages, I urge you to get some help and to unpack the ways in our community that we have help. We have medical treatment, we have therapy-based programs, and we have other types of programs through different specialists like neurologists that can be hands-on, very fast. I'm going to come and talk with you today, or I'll get you an appointment in the next 2 or 3 or 4 days. We have a program like that. There are programs that you can get into within a few weeks where you have a physician who can see you every few months and follow you for medical care. And then we have these longer ranging programs that might be a more longer term follow-up, such as what is available on those programs that Mary was talking about. I do want you to make sure that you are being very, very honest with your physician about what you're dealing with at home, very, very specifically, even making notes and taking those notes into your physician's practice. I know that when Mary was talking about, how to go to the doctor, because those are the types of things your doctor can hang their hat on, because my loved one might do particularly well while they're in the doctor's office and particularly poorly at home.